Anthony Yarde versus Sergey Kovalev. And I guess I should really introduce the champion first, but I'm obviously a Brit, and maybe unconscious bias towards Anthony Yarde maybe sets the tone for this video. Maybe not, actually. So I've held off making a video about this fight because I'm still not entirely convinced the fight goes ahead, and I think as of making this, it's only like 12 days or something, 10 days until the fight. And I still haven't really seen any kind of conclusive press conference between the two fighters to say that it's going to go ahead, but let's assume that it does. And what do we think is going to happen? So this is a bit of a first for me, really. There aren't many examples that I've seen in my kind of 10, 15 years watching boxing of a boxer fighting. It really, I appreciate Yarde's been at European level briefly, but the vast majority, or the vast majority makes it sound like he has a huge history, a huge repertoire of opponents, but the majority of his opponents have been a very low level. We would maybe call it Division 3, kind of that taxi driver / construction worker. They do boxing as an afterthought kind of level of opposition. And a lot of boxers have looked sensational against, and I don't mean disrespect to these guys because they're just doing what they love, probably earning a bit of money on the side. But punching bags don't really offer too much resistance, and it can be very easy to look sensational as a professional boxer that carries power on these punching bag style opponents. Same as when you're working pads. I think everyone's seen the Yarde and Tunde pad work videos and look sensational, etc. And of course we saw Chris Eubanks Jr. do the exact same thing and really come undone at world level. All the kind of flashiness and the combinations and the power dissipated, and what you were left with was somebody who was afraid to throw punches because they were afraid to miss. Their punch volume dropped right off. And is Yarde looking at a very similar situation? This is one of these videos that it's difficult to call because we don't know enough about Yarde to know how he's going to respond mentally. Physically, he's very, very gifted. He's a real talent. He throws. My only concern with him, he's a little bit too right-hand dominant. He jumps in with a lovely lead left hook, but I think I can only really, from all the fights I've seen, which is I've seen all of his fights, I think it's only one that he does real damage with is jump in, lead left hook. It's all from the right. And he throws a vicious his body shot with his right hook. I mean, he really turns the whole thing into it. It looks devastating. And I think that could be Kovalev's undoing. If he keys to victory, would be ripping in that body shot, that right hook. And if he has the confidence to throw it in the event and the magnitude of the stage, and Kovalev's power doesn't diminish his confidence, then he's in with a great chance of winning. So I do think that Kovalev, and I've been watching Kovalev for a long time, and the very first time I was really like, wow, was when he fought Nathan Cleverly. And I've never, even to this day, watching a fight live, been so impressed by somebody's fluidity and power of motion. Go back and watch that fight again, because Kovalev, or rather Cleverly, to that point was undefeated and had looked like he was always too big for the opponent. He looked imposing. Very difficult to imagine Cleverly losing, really, against his current opposition. And then along comes Kovalev, and just anything that Cleverly tried to do was just, again, diminished. Just it had no impact. It was this juggernaut that had this fluidity and grace, and the way his punches were just seamless. They were fed together so perfectly, and it was a joy to watch, actually. It was kind of heartbreaking because I was a Cleverly fan. But the fluidity of his punches, again, I encourage you to go back and watch the fight. They were absolutely beautiful, and everything that landed just seemed to absolutely annihilate any resolve and determination that Cleverly had. It was quite an eye-opener, and it certainly isn't something that I expected to see. And of course, since then I went back and looked at all of the Kovalev fights I could find. And again, he's a precocious puncher. He hits very, 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 very hard. I don't think he hits quite as hard now as he did. And again, I think Kovalev is a very mental fighter. I think if he gets the beating of you mentally, then his punches seem to get an extra edge of snap to it. And I suppose Yarde is maybe in a very similar situation. Maybe all boxers are like that, or a lot of them at least, that kind of bully mentality that while you're dominating the fight, you look absolutely like $1 million. But when resistance is toughening up a little bit, then I think, for me, that's where you get the elite. The Andre Wards, the Mayweathers, that have an extra gear, that can make adjustments, that have that mental fortitude. And for me, I think, I've never boxed, but I've been watching it for a long time, and I think mental fortitude is equally as important as strength and speed. And I don't just mean resolve, I mean to not allow the moment and the opponent to curb and impact your everyday approach to a fight. Everything you've done previously, your approach, your punch volume. And I think the moment a boxer has his punch volume or her punch volume impacted, then again, I think it's sometimes it's tactical, but I think most of the time it's mental fortitude and doubt and concern about what's coming back. And I do wonder, we haven't really seen Yarde in with too many huge punchers. I mean, he took a few decent punches against Reeves, and he has a nice defense. He kind of lifts the shoulder, but his right hand coming up, because he's so right hand heavy and right hand dominant, he does bring his right hand up quite nicely sometimes to protect against these kind of left hooks. But I do think that he's open, because quite often he kind of forgets to bring the hand back up because he's so concerned with his offense. And maybe in such a high stakes fight, his defense will be super switched on. He'll be super alert and remembering it. But that when he gets complacent, when he gets relaxed, that right hand can sink low, and he just forgets to bring it back up. And I have seen he counter blocks with it very well. When he sees a left hook coming, he will lift it and just snap up the defense and then kind of counter off it, actually. But he doesn't always do that. I don't think it's drilled into him as well as somebody like a Mayweather. I think he's definitely an offense first fighter. Well, he still has a very good defense, a much better than average defense from what I've seen so far. But he's definitely open to a left hook. And something else he does as well is he has his jaw open when he goes into hurt, when he goes into finish. His mouth comes open like he's yelling. I tell you, if he does that against Kovalev and Kovalev catches him with a right hook, it's going to break his jaw. And I've seen that in fights before, with fighters trying to fight with broken jaws. Very, very painful. And the last thing you need as an inexperienced fighter is something like an injury to contend with, as well as the actual fight itself. It's a minor detail, but I think something that there are a lot of factors that go into these fights, and so many variables. And it only takes one variable to do something different or alter slightly, and the whole dynamic of the fight can change. I do think he said he's a bit right hand happy, and he does himself. He does throw a lovely overhand right, really, really, really lovely overhand right, and I said that ripping punch to the body. But what happens with a fight? For me, I think he stops Kovalev to the body. I think his body works too good. But for us for me as a Brit, I know a lot about Yarde. But I do wonder though how this is going to be perceived worldwide. Is Yarde the equivalent to one of these Tyson Fury opponents that outside of the country nobody's ever heard of? Is that who? I mean, Yarde isn't a world champion. He's a European champion, and he's fought nobody of note really. So is that how the world perceives him? Is it just like Kovalev's fighting some guy nobody's ever heard of from the UK, and they're paying him loads of money for some reason? I'm not sure. I can't. I mean, I imagine that can't necessarily, or not to the same extent, because obviously he's sponsored and he's quite active on social media, and he's, I guess, fairly famous. So, but maybe to an extent, that's the public's perception. And maybe it's Kovalev's perception, which if it is, I think that, again, just drastically improves Yarde's chances of winning. And we've all heard of the Kovalev stories about the drinking and the plane and the court case, and none of this really points to a successful and a productive camp. So that's not to say that Kovalev won't turn up, and it's not to say that Kovalev can't turn up and knock Yarde out with a single punch or a simple 1-2. It could easily happen. Kovalev carries real power and a beautiful jab. I think Kovalev's jab is when he's really working it, it's a beautiful thing. And the thing is, well, with Kovalev is he's one of these very, very rare fighters that carries enormous power without having to load up. And I think sometimes he does load up, for me unnecessarily so, and he can burn unnecessary energy. And I think that's something that Buddy McGirt taught him in the rematch with Elite Alvarez, to not load up with every single punch. Because he has these really short kind of counter punches. I don't know how much you guys have seen or studied Kovalev, but he throws a really beautiful, just like a short snapping straight. And it comes out of nowhere, and you can see the power it has on it. Just natural power. And I think it caused Ward quite a lot of issues in their first fight. Because he's like, there's no wind up to Kovalev's short punches. And he generates the same power. Sometimes he doesn't even need hip rotation. He's just blessed with power. And Yarde's never going to have experienced that. So, and it's fast. Yeah, he's never fought someone, I don't want to say he's never fought someone as fast as Kovalev, but not with the consistency and the counter punching. And Kovalev blocked quite beautifully against Elite Alvarez in the rematch. Just really nice back foot stuff, pumping a jab, 1, 2, 3, 4 combinations. Boxed very well. So I am reluctantly picking Yarde to win by stoppage, but it there's so many variables. It's not a convincing pick. I'm not out here saying Yarde. Of course he stops Kovalev. Whatever. He has the talent and the attributes to stop Kovalev for sure. But whether it comes to fruition, I'm not sure. I don't say it with any great certainty, but that's head to the gun. I think Kovalev Yarde by stoppage. But I'm intrigued to see it. I really am. I hope we don't have another Chris Eubanks Jr. on our hands. That looks incredible against lower level opposition, incredible in the bags and the pads. But then when you meet somebody who is live against you, that can catch you and can hurt you, are you going to be as impressive? We'll find out. I'll see you soon, and take care, folks.